So good morning, everyone. So my name is Mathilde Abattu, and together with my colleague, and especially Raphaël Aubert, we're going to present to you the Synergy project that was started in September 2017. The intent behind this project is to highlight, by means of pilot cases, the benefits of an enhanced integration of the DOA processes and the product certification activities. So this presentation will consist of 3 different modules. So together with Raphael, we'll focus on the module 1 and 2, and we will assess the usefulness and the efficiency of this project. Through the module 1, we will introduce the concept with a theory, and we will explain why the project is needed. On the module 2, we will highlight the implementation of the concept through 4 pilot cases. We will also have a shared experience with one of the pilot cases. And to conclude, through the module 3, and to enhance the authority point of view, we will have feedback from the industry with a presentation from the AMAC Aerospace pilot case. So by giving you this overview of this initiative, we will hopefully answer all of your questions on the forthcoming slides. And we kindly ask you to take note of your questions and to use Slido. And we will for sure address them at the end of the AMAC Aerospace presentation. So we also know that some of you may already be familiar with the topic, as you might have seen and read the STC's newsletter that was published in spring 2018. And there were also some familiarization sessions within EASA, but we think it will be a valuable reminder. So let's start with the concept theory. So why does the Synergy project matters? So this project, as stated previously, enhances integration of the DOA surveillance processes and the STC certification activities. So one of the main aspects we would like to highlight is the fact that this project will enhance and enable the overall communication. So it will not only be limited to issues management and discussion, but it will enable discussion between, for example, the DOA holder and the authorities, so the EASA and the NAA, and on the other end, internal communication will be also enhanced, so inside EASA with the PCM, the expert, and the DOA team leader. So this will for sure build trust and create long-term relationship, and it will derive and share the best practices. So this aspect will then for sure increase the dialogue and the cooperation between the DOA surveillance and the STC processes. And it will give a good insight of the design organization working method. So meaning, for example, that it will give valuable data, for example, that are important for the design organization process monitoring. So then finally, one of the goals of this project is to really replace the a posteriori audit by live project follow-up. And this will, at the end, avoid complex situations where STC approval may be challenged. So in order to adapt to the different investigation, the Synergy project set up different phases in a progressive way. So the Synergy project has a flexible approach with a scalable backbone. So each step of the project has been built in order to adapt. So each phases of this project that will be defined a bit later on, they can be relevant or not depending on the characteristic of the project. So if we start by taking into account one of the characteristics, that could be the criticality, it means that the project can accommodate, for example, from a simple to very complex major change and differently from its criticality. So another characteristic that could be taken into account will be the repetitiveness. For example, on a project with the same scope of the STC modification, the phase 0 or the phase 1, that will also be shown later on, can be run faster, so without eligibility check or without performance analysis when possible. So finally, we can also take the characteristic of the PCM knowledge of the design organization that he or she acquired from previous projects. So the PCM will be more familiar and aware of the company and of its documents. So this project is following a flexible approach with a tailored process. So even if this process is tailored to different projects, we believe there is still a need for this enhanced cooperation.
Thanks, Mathilde. So Mathilde just mentioned that we will have a very flexible process, but still, we do think there is a case for this synergy project. And in fact, we already identify some, let's say, areas of improvement where this synergy project will make the difference by enhancing the way we're working all together. Firstly, PCM and experts will get some benefits in becoming more familiar with the way the design organization works, and also on the way the documentation of this organization is structured. Well, this will mean that we will have an increased efficiency, even more when PCM and experts will have to deal with this documentation. Secondly, we would like to avoid any misalignment between the DOA scope of work as stated in the terms of approval and, let's say, the STC scope. Well, it may be the case that the DOA significant change is needed to perform a certain kind of STC, but we don't want this DOA significant change to be a showstopper for the DOA holder to obtain the STC approval. Well, then we all know that the demonstration of compliance is a key element of the STC process. But well, if we have documents of even higher quality, this will mean that this document will be even more easily reviewed by the team from the authorities. Well, when we mean higher quality, for example, it may say that, for example, you have the document released with the proper flow of signatories, and you have all target requirements clearly identified on the documentation. And last example, if I may, if you have any involvement of a design subcontractor, this shall be stated clearly on this documentation. Well, now we reach the point that may be the most interesting for you. In the end, we aim at avoiding any reworking on an STC project, because for now, we have an STC process which is going on one way, and on the other line, we have the DOA audits. And on the DOA world, we are sometimes auditing the STC core process, meaning that we are sampling and reviewing postly approved STCs. And we would like to really merge these two processes and go towards process monitoring. Well, these elements can only be really tackled if we have an enhanced integration of the DOA team leader inside the STC team. Well, that's why we are really aiming at enhancing the cooperation between, on one side, the DOA, and the other side, the type investigation. And we do believe both sides of the equation can bring added value to the process. On the DOA side, and with the DOA team leader, there is a knowledge of the organization and the way the documentation is structured. And this can be very valuable for the PCM and expert. They will be able to exactly know where to find the relevant information, and it may be really valuable if this is the first time they see this company. Well, on the other side, on the STC process, the PCM and expert perfectly know the process and perfectly know the STC process and all the technicalities. But still, the process is a bit run in isolation. And the DOA team leader is involved, let's say, when there are some challenges or issues. And we would like to move from this view towards a much more integrated one. Rather than getting a process audit on the DOA side and a product audit on the STC side, we would like to move towards an integrated approach and go for process monitoring. So if we reach this state, this will mean that we have a much more integrated DOA holder monitoring, meaning that also the performance measurement will be much more transparent for you, the DOA holders. And this very last point will bring benefits, both for the industry, but also first, the authorities. Well, if we start by the authority side, if you have a PCM who is more familiar with the DOA environment, this will mean that he will be or she will be able to run a leaner and more efficient process when reviewing the documentation. And if you add on top of that enhanced communication between the main stakeholders, being PCM, experts, and DOA team leader, this will ensure that information is shared, which is really important, and that best practices are derived, as Mathilde just mentioned, and spread. Well, this last point is just not something simple, because this has a very strong impact on the industry. If we spread these best practices, this will mean that we will ensure standardization of approaches, meaning that whoever the PCM is, you will get the very same information. And second point, which is, I guess, of higher interest to you, we will try to avoid any duplication of work, hence trigger some time saving. Instead of getting two processes going in two separate lanes, we would like to integrate these two processes and go for a single process monitoring. For us, this will really participate in enhancing the trust between the authorities and the DA holder community. And for that, we want also to show that we will deliver feedback at the end of an STC process, both on product aspect, as it's done today, but also on procedural aspect, which is a bit missing for now. So you may say, thank you very much for this hopefully nice conceptual presentation, but do you have a plan? And indeed, we do have a detailed action plan. Mathilde, we just introduced the plan afterwards. But first, she will remind all of us what are the main steps of the STC process. Not because we fear that you are not comfortable with the STC process, but really to show that we are taking into account what is already existing, building on that, and not adding any additional administrative burden.
So thank you. So as you are probably aware already, so the STC process is made of the following 5 phases. So the phase 0 corresponding to the definition and agreement of the working method with the agencies through the eligibility check. You have the phase 1 about the technical familiarization and the establishment of the certification basis. The phase 2 regarding the formal acceptance of the certification plan, the certification program, and the definition of the level of involvement by the expert. That will bring us to the phase 3, which corresponds to the review of the applicant's documentation, and it gives feedback on the compliance documents. And then the final phase will be the phase 4, which corresponds to the review of the to the issuance, of the technical visa, the statement of satisfaction, and at the end to the STC issuance. So after this short review, we will now progress through the synergy process that integrates and mirror into the STC process. So as you understood, there is a list of tasks that have been developed in order to enhance the cooperation and the integration between the STC and the DOA surveillance processes. So these tasks are nested into the phases of the STC process, and each task are allocated either to the DOA team leader or to the PCM and experts. So if we go first of all on the phase 0, corresponding to the project definition, the PCM will verify the compatibility of the project application with the last revision of the DOA terms of approval. On the other hand, the DOA team leader will provide to the PCM and the certification team with the analysis on the DOA performance. Regarding the phase 1, concerning the initial certification basis, the PCM will provide feedback to the DOA team leader regarding the completeness of the certification program. We will see this a bit more in the details on the presentation made by Cyrus and Oscar later on. On the other side, the DOA team leader will be more involved in the STC process. For example, he can attend some familiarization meeting. On the phase 2, so this is a great example showing the perfect integration of the synergy project within the STC process. We have 1 phases for the 2 processes. So this is the phase 2 corresponding to the formal acceptance of the certification program. And at this stage, the certification team and the DOA team leader should have a clear overview of the required demonstration of compliance, as well as the framework in which it will be developed. We'll go now on the phase 3. So on one side, the DOA team leader will provide to the certification team with more details on the structure of the compliance documentation. This will ease the documentary review and will allow, on the second hand, it will allow the PCM and the expert to really focus and concentrate on the technical content. We will end up on the phase 4, which is the STC issuance. So the PCM and the expert will give their feedback to the design organization department through the established channel. And on the other hand, the DOA team leader will draw conclusion on the investigation and report to the certification team. So this covers the different phases of the synergy project. So in order to highlight the implementation of such a concept and to check its efficiency, 4 pilot cases have been developed, and they're now going to be introduced by Raphael.
Yeah, sorry, me again. But good news, it's time for some examples. So we will subdivide this presentation into 2 different submodules. On the first one, we will briefly introduce the 4 pilot cases, then dive into kind of the pilot case we have selected for today's presentation, and then we will leave the floor to Oskar, DOA team leader from ESA, and Cyrus, PCM from Austro Control, for them to give you their feedback on the project they worked on. Well, so to begin with, here are the 4 companies with the 4 pilot cases. So Air France, STC21, Mac Aerospace, and Gomolsik. So I guess there are representatives of all 4 companies into this room. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for working with us, because it's very important for us to get your feedback and to try to improve the way we are working. So now let's dive into the selected pilot case for today's presentation. So we have the case from Mac Aerospace. Why? Because this case is a perfect illustration of what we want to promote: enhanced cooperation. Well, first of all, we have a Mac Aerospace that volunteered to provide a fair industry view. And thank you very much, Roger, for being there today and for delivering your view on the 3rd module of this presentation. Then we have a DOA team leader from ESA, Oskar, and a PCM, an expert from Austro Control, PCM being Cyrus. So basically, if you have no good cooperation and if you have no framework for cooperation and communication, this project will fail. Good news, this project is in good health because it's running. We are now in phase 3, I guess. And so I guess so far so good. Well, this will be confirmed later on for sure. Well, something kind of important also for us. We want to mention that this pilot case has been selected for today's presentation, as I explained. But we will take into account the feedback from all different pilot cases, because we want to really gather the feedback through informal discussions, and we have also some structured feedback checklist for getting some more structured feedback. And really, our aim is to get the feedbacks to make this project beneficial for all of us, not just build something that is of useful, but is really useless for everyone. So we want really to focus on something which is useful for all of us. So now, I guess it's time for the field feedback, and so we will leave the floor to both Oskar and Cyrus for their presentation on what they already lived in one project. Thank you very much.
It comes to the part we know all about what we should do and what it is good for, but then they will start the how should we do it. And we have an eligibility check, a thing which you all know we do during every project, because we're supposed to, in accordance with the internal working procedure. In this case, we have a project selected which was not very common to Mac Aerospace, because the content was not the main domain of the company. So I got in contact with Oskar here, and we had a quick phone call on what AMAC plans to do, and so on and so forth. And he made me aware that the OSD issue, I don't know if you heard about this already, was not closed at the time. So issuance of STC might be a problem. So if you know it at the early stage, I got in contact with AMAC, told them about the OSD thing. They explained to me that it's still ongoing, and they expect that it should be closed prior to the STC issue. In another conference call, I went with Oskar through the feedback from other colleagues on the DOA performance, which gives a relatively good insight on how AMAC is dealing with projects at all. You see, until now, AMAC didn't have anything to do. We did it on our own. AMAC provided already a certification program, which is also very common and which AMAC always does. So we reviewed the certification program, and there was not a big outcome on the CP itself. We finished the review of the compliance documents last week. So we are almost in phase 4, because this week we will have a team meeting with all the experts involved, and then we are going to contact Oskar and give him a detailed feedback on our feeling and our observations on the documentation. Here you go.
Good morning, everyone. So you have heard from Cyrus that we started working together and sharing information, and naturally we saw some benefits in this working together. One of them is better actually seen if we compare not how we were working for this specific pilot case, but actually how we are working on the everyday basis. So on the everyday basis, what the DU team leader does and has access to is a view on the deliverables of a company frozen in time in one audit per year, or perhaps one annual report per year. And this gives us somehow a static view of how the company is in fact performing their work every day. So the pilot project in synergy terms allowed us to have a better understanding, not how what you have done looks like when it is complete, but actually how you are performing your work on the daily basis. It also allowed us to have a timely identification of areas to focus on, because if we have only an oversight on given moments in time, then we only perhaps every 6 months have some notion of what is happening with your organization. Instead, if we accompany such a project, then we can go through the phases and see if there is any issue and if we can address it directly on the spot instead of just receiving feedback afterwards and trying to recover it from the past. There is, with all of this, also a potential reduction of the oversight activity, because if we can collect this feedback can actually provide the information we need about the processes of the organization, instead of having to perform only audits to see past projects. This benefits from the DOA team leader side.
Yeah, of course. I also monitored some benefits. It has nothing to do with this microphone. You know, I'm shaking a little bit. If there is an item in the process which might result in deficiencies, a solution could be found, taking all stakeholders on the table and discuss what would be what would probably the best solution for this deficiency. I think this is a more effective processing of tasks than having a process and an audit afterwards and trying to find a better solution. For me, it was much easier to verify the scope of the DOA and identify also the interfaces to oh, sorry. Okay. Ha. Here it is. As an example, during the project, AMAG was forced to have some design changes which we did not expect at the very beginning, resulting in additional testing and additional flight testing and all this stuff. And so the relationship to another company came up, and it was easy for me because I just called Oskar and said, they intend to do flight testing with a permit to fly under flight conditions from a different company. Are they allowed to do this? And he said, yes, of course they are. So it was much easier than trying to dig through all the process and procedures to figure out if it's okay what they're doing or not. And as usual, it was okay. And yeah, and what's the in my opinion, what's the most important thing is that for the DOA colleagues, they audit the process when it happens. So not afterwards or some fictitious project where they don't have the detailed knowledge. They're auditing when it happens, and this is the most important benefit out of this project.
Well, we didn't want you to believe that everything were roses, so there are some challenges to handle in such an approach. So from our side, as DOA team leaders, I would see a very big change in terms of mindset. So how we actually view our work. And this can also be compared to what we are doing today. So today we received feedback from PCMs and experts, which is compiled in a database. And at the year's end, we are supposed to analyze that data, static data, over what happened during the year, and then decide the oversight that we want to do to the next period. And actually, in some situations, we always act in accordance with latest news now, so there is also a possibility to receive direct feedback on how projects are performing from certification teams, but that is actually not the standard. So mostly the project is, the process is somehow static. In such an approach of synergy, then we come into live cooperation, meaning we have to change our way of planning and just going through the motion of yearly activities into there is a new project, we have to react, so we have to participate, we have to receive data, we have to process it timely and take appropriate action also timely in terms of oversight. Besides mindset, our mentality, how we work, this actually needs tasks. So the tasks that we do routinely now, they would have to be slightly changed to be able to accommodate this novel way of working. So receiving the feedback, then processing it, then asking for additional support, then starting additional audits, for example, in processes where it was spotted that improvement was necessary.
Thank you. Yeah, and one of the things I'm a little bit scared of is whenever there is a new thing, it means more work. And it's, I think, time to remove tasks instead of adding new tasks. We will see what Amak will tell us about all this task thing and if we met this goal. But this is one of the most important challenges we are facing right now, is that we tend to put additional checklists and additional things and so on and so forth. And then it isn't a synergy anymore, it's just even more work. The next thing I observed during the whole progress as an external party to the agency is that communication is much more easier if you can have a coffee together at the cafeteria. It needs a lot of extra, let's say, work to arrange a conference call, to have a meeting or something like this. So I think that we also need to enhance a little bit the software tools and for this communication on one hand, and to make the data available for all stakeholders. So we are all dealing with the same set of data, with the same set of information. Yeah, so I think I can hand over to Oscar again.
There are a number of questions on our mind still. So, with our experience with this project, what did we learn? Did we learn that this can be reproduced in all cases, and or not, or only for some kind of organizations? if an organization deals with, let's say, 10 STC projects in 1 year, so how many would it be recommendable to deal in synergy for efficiency and also effectiveness? And how to launch such a project? Should it always be at the start, or could we also, for long projects, step in the middle? Those are still questions unanswered from our part that perhaps already came up in your minds and perhaps can be further discussed in questions later on. And now, Amak.
So my name is Roger Sandman. I'm the head of engineering certification at AMAG Aerospace. I don't know, maybe most of the audience do not know AMAG Aerospace. We are a completion center which was founded in 2007, became operational in 2008, end of 2008, and located at the Euro Airport Basel. We grew up from them up to 650 people now. And we received our design organization approval in May 2010. Since then, we did about 700 minor mods and about 40 major change STC projects. And 10 of them are in our core business, which is VIP interior completion, full VIP interiors. So projects from AC-20 size up to 747-8. Since 2014-15, we had a dedicated PCM, which helped us really that the PCM knows our DOA processes and really did an efficient improvement on the working with STCs. The pilot project is a little bit out of our typical scope of work, which is a self-protection system installation. It's a laser DIRCM system, which consists of 4 IR sensors and a laser jamming turret. All the equipment were located behind fairings or integrated into the structure, so there was a lot of structural work on the aircraft. From the certification side, main emphasis was on laser safety, which is as well something which is not typical work for a completion center. So this is a little bit the background. And in addition, we had to increase a little bit our knowledge on structural substantiation as well, because as part of the requirements of the system, we had to do modal analysis. We had to have a very efficient installation, and the installation tolerance was very small. So this was all challenges we had to face. And the one case Cyrus was mentioning was that we had to relocate the VHF antenna due to the installation of the turret, which was as well as small, not really a challenge, it was just a technical work to move it on a fairing, which is unfortunately not a metal structure, so he had to do the required bonding to get the VHF performance done. So we actually see the Synergy project as a kind of a combined effort between an ongoing STC project, which is very target-oriented. You have to deliver the aircraft in time. You have a clear work scope, with a surveillance audit, which is actually looking at your processes, how you arrive at the target. So the DOA team leader could really monitor our DOA working and processes live, because he was copied in all the communication with Austro Control. So he had the complete insight how we work with authorities. In addition, we had the one case with the flight condition approval, where we worked with another company to see how we integrate with other DOAs to get certain work packages done. However, we see a certain limitation on the Synergy project for DOAs, which are mainly doing minor modifications. This will be not something which can be integrated into the Synergy project. And especially, we are a design organization which has a strong link to our own production organization and our own maintenance organization. These are all clear working interfaces where we are very closely audited in our projects, but typically this is something which will maybe not be seen in a Synergy project. Then in general, we have not really experienced an increased workload for us. We copied the DOA team leader in the communication. He was in conference calls. So this did not really generate additional workload on our side. So from this point, I think the promises are kept. From our point of view as well, I think the synergy project can be pushed a little bit more forward. In this case, maybe to always also include experts which will be later on maybe involved in the DOA surveillance as such, so that you really can reduce the workload during surveillance audits. So that maybe the product audits can be reduced in the future. The challenge here might be really how to develop a systematic approach to determine how much you can reduce the surveillance audit activities based on the complexity of the work done or the number of projects done. So this was a little bit in the nutshell what we have experienced on the Synergy project. And we have to say, in general, it works very fine for us.
Thank you.